The case I have for you today, it's a pretty heavy one, I'm not gonna lie, and it is genuinely so shocking. I'm talking about Steven Sueppel and the Sueppel family murders. Sadly, stories of familicide are not totally unheard of, but that is exactly what we were talking about today. Whenever I hear stories of a parent taking out their entire family, it always leaves me feeling so horrified. There's no reason ever for someone to play God and end the lives of their innocent children. Well, enough of me preaching at you, let's get into the story. So, Steven Sueppel was a 42-year-old former banker living in Iowa City with his wife and 4 kids. He was often described as kind, caring, and religious. But what he did on Easter Sunday of 2008 proves that statement to be very wrong. At 11:30 p.m. on March 23rd, something inside Steven snapped. He left a voicemail at the law firm his brother and father worked at that said his family was in heaven. But just before leaving the message on the answering machine, Steven had bludgeoned his 42-year-old wife Cheryl to death in their bedroom. Now, at this point, their 4 children were still alive. Between the hours of 11:30 p.m. on Sunday and 3:45 a.m. on Monday, Steven tried to think through his next plan of action. He was going to end the lives of his children, but he could not decide the best way to do it. The children were fast asleep in their beds when Steven walked into their rooms and brought them into the garage. Making sure the garage door was shut, Steven got in after them. He started up the vehicle in an attempt to off himself and his kids by carbon monoxide poisoning. It's unclear how long this method took, but it took too long for Steven's liking. And finally, he got the kids out of the car and ushered them back to their rooms, keeping the youngest in the downstairs toy room. At this point, Steven grabbed a baseball bat and beat his children to their demise. At 3:45 a.m., Steven called up his former employer, Hills Bank, and left a message on their answering machine. The details of this message were not released, but we can assume it was something along the lines of the message he left for his father and brother. At 3:50 a.m., Steven called his own home to leave a voicemail. In this message, he expressed his regret for what he had done, but there was nothing anyone could do at that point. Steven's entire family was gone. Now, it's unclear when precisely this next event took place. Based on another voicemail left at the house at 4:01 a.m., Steven documented that he had attempted to take his own life by drowning in the Iowa River at Lower City Park. This attempt was unsuccessful because Steven just kept floating. He called multiple people, and in each voicemail, he apologized repeatedly. He talked about his regret and embarrassment because of his legal problems, but his tone was flat. On top of calling the house to document his actions throughout the evening, Steven wrote a letter detailing his actions and feelings. He left it on the kitchen table to be found later. Even when he was no longer present in the home, he continued to document the events by calling back to the home and basically self-reporting, said one of the sergeants working the case. And at 6:31 a.m. Monday morning, Steven called 911. The call was incredibly short and did not detail the murders or who was on the other end. The dispatcher picked up the call and Steven told them the address, 629 Barrington Road. Please go there immediately. Steven hung up the phone when the dispatcher asked what the emergency was. At 6:36 a.m., Steven drove his car into a concrete pillar on Interstate 80, just outside Iowa City. He was driving at super high speeds and intentionally swerved his vehicle. It went up in flames, and Steven could only be identified through his dental records. He died from blunt force trauma. Steven's wife and kids were all found lifeless in the family home. 10-year-old Ethan, 8-year-old Seth, and 5-year-old Mira were all in their bedrooms. 3-year-old Eleanor was in the toy room. Once the autopsies were performed, examiners reported Cheryl and all 4 kids died from blunt force trauma to their heads and upper torso. I know this is a lot to take in, so while you process, I'm going to share more about the family's background to give you more context. So Steven Francis Sueppel was born in Iowa City, Iowa on August 13, 1965. His parents, William and Patricia Sueppel, had 8 children altogether, and Steven was their 6th. In 1983, Steven graduated from Regina High School, which is a private Catholic school in Iowa City. After that, he enrolled at the University of Northern Iowa, where he received a bachelor's degree in business. Everyone who knew Steven described him as a big jokester. He was a tall, lanky guy who was a little bit of a dweeb, but people loved him for it. He always wanted to make people laugh and to feel included, never directly attacking someone to get a laugh. He enjoyed playing basketball, tennis, and golf, and would spend his free time fishing. On February 21st, 1966, in Sioux City, Iowa, Cheryl Margot Kesterson was born to her parents, John and Gisela. Cheryl was known to be a hard worker and was very active in her community. She graduated from high school and got her bachelor's in education at the University of Iowa. Cheryl met Stephen in 1985 at a bar called the Field House in Iowa City. The two immediately hit it off and talked the entire night. After meeting, they began dating. The two had never really been in a serious relationship before and were each other's first, which was very sweet to them. After 5 years, Cheryl and Stephen got married on June 13, 1990. Cheryl worked as a school teacher in the Iowa City School District from 1989 to 2001. She focused on the elementary years, specifically 3rd and 4th grade. She was great with children, and after a few years of marriage, decided to start a family with Stephen. The couple adopted 4 children from South Korea: Ethan, Seth, Mira, and Eleanor. Cheryl and Stephen attended church weekly as a family and were known throughout the community for their volunteer work. It was documented that Cheryl and Stephen were big into charity work and donated to multiple organizations, including the School District Foundation and the Iowa City Hospice. They had huge hearts. Cheryl ended up quitting her teaching job to care for her 4 children. Raising kids is a huge task, especially when you have 4 of them, so Stephen took on the breadwinner role. And while everything looked completely normal on the outside, a lot was happening in Stephen's world that nobody knew about. He worked as an executive of Hills Bank and Trust Company. The family lived in a lovely house that was pretty substantial in size. I mean, working as a bank executive sets you up for some solid financial success. But the pressure to maintain a comfortable lifestyle for his family was setting in. In February of 2008, Stephen was charged with embezzlement. That's right, y'all. Stephen had stolen over $559,040 from his former employer. He had slowly taken small amounts from July 26, 2000 through September 12, 2007. Obviously, when that amount of money is missing, people are bound to notice. A lot of numbers were not adding up, and it all came back to the accounts that Stephen had managed. So an investigation took place, and Stephen was indicted by a grand jury for 1 count of embezzlement and 6 counts of money laundering. On February 20th, 2008, Stephen pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. A court date was set for April of 2008 to get into all the juicy bits of the money theft. The hearing only lasted 15 minutes. Stephen assured the judge that he had moved on from the company and worked in the concrete business where he never touched the finances. The same month, Cheryl started a new job as the Education and Training Coordinator at 4C's Child Care Resource and Referral in Iowa City. Despite this incredibly scary time for Stephen and Cheryl, everything looked completely fine from the outside. They were loving parents, never let the children hear their legal woes, and continued attending church every Sunday. Stephen had gone to this church growing up, got married to Cheryl there, and had all 4 of their kids baptized there as well. They were regulars, and the community knew them as a healthy, loving family. On March 23, 2008, the entire Sueppel family went to church for Easter Sunday Mass. From everyone who was there, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The 4 kids were fine, and by the family, friends, and church leaders' accounts, Stephen seemed to be totally normal. After Mass ended, the family returned home and went about their day. Later in the evening, a family friend stopped by their house to catch up and hang out. This friend, yet again, remembered everything as usual and said the couple was in great spirits. However, after this friend left the Sueppel's home, nothing would be the same again. Stephen executed his entire family and later himself. But why? A few different sources wrote that Stephen had been stealing money to support his blow addiction. When he spoke with the FBI during his embezzlement case, Stephen admitted that it was a problem. However, there is no evidence to support this claim. It's believed that in lieu of having a reason for the missing money, blaming it on a substance problem seemed like an easy enough route. Stephen's life had become too much to support. His wife quit her teaching job to take care of their 4 adopted children. Their family home was large and had 9 rooms. While they were not living lavishly wealthy lives, they had a big family. Their lifestyle was hard to upkeep, and he felt the pressure. After this horrifying incident, the community took a significant hit. People who knew the family, the kids' teachers, co-workers of Stephen and Cheryl, and of course their families. No one could believe that this was real and happened in their own town. I mean, imagine, you just saw this lovely family at an Easter service the day before, and now this? One of the Sueppel's neighbors, Roberta, had spent time with the family and had seen them just a week prior. She knew that the couple was going through a lot in terms of finances and legal troubles, but she knew they were working through it. She said, "I do know he was distraught over the situation, but there was no indication this was going to happen. They were great people. They were involved with their kids. We're just still in shock about why this had to happen." This case is already highly complex and extremely heartbreaking. But to make matters worse, the entire family was buried next to each other. That's right, Stephen was buried next to the wife and 4 children he murdered. The funeral was held at St. Mary's Catholic Church, and many opposed Stephen's inclusion in the service. The community felt that he should be buried on his own, with his own service. But ultimately, the theme of the service was forgiveness, and everyone was buried together. The Hills Bank and Trust Company went after Stephen's estate, and in August of 2008, they demanded that they be paid back. In addition to the large number of funds that had been stolen, they wanted $32,673 in outstanding loans. And that is the terrible story of the Sueppel familicide. I mean, I really hate this guy. Anybody else? Like, my question is, why take the lives of your kids and your wife? They're totally innocent. They were not the ones embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just because you can't live with the embarrassment of going to jail and everyone knowing your legal business, why leave a legacy like this behind? Also, you decided to adopt and give these children a chance at a great life, and now you're the one taking it away? None of this makes any sense to me. And that is all I have for you today. I'm Lucy, and I hope you will all join me on another episode of Killer Bites. Until then, stay safe out there.